wind was just beginning to shift as Nathan Bellamy watched his children disappear down the street on their bikes. Emma was 12, already acting like a teenager, and Josh Neen Bold was just trying to keep up. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that felt harmless. That illusion cracked 3 hours later. Nathan had been unpacking boxes in the garage, lost in a playlist from the early 2000s, when he glanced at the time and realized the kids should have returned long ago. It wasn't like them to vanish, not without calling. He grabbed his phone. No messages, no missed calls. A sinking unease crept in, the kind only parents understand. Nathan drove the streets of Willow Glen Estates slowly, checking the park, the cul-de-sac, even the shaded trail behind the tennis courts. Nothing. Then, at the far end of the community, he noticed something strange. The clubhouse lights were still on, even though the sign clearly stated it closed at 6. As he approached, he heard a faint knocking. He stepped closer, then froze. Emma's voice came muffled through the door. "Dad, is that you?" The door wouldn't budge. Nathan's military instincts kicked in. He circled the building, checking every window and emergency exit. All locked, no signs of tampering, just deliberate sealing. It took the property manager 20 minutes to arrive, muttering about routine system malfunctions as he typed in a code and unlatched the door. The kids stumbled out. Josh clutched his sister's arm like he hadn't let go for hours. "They said we couldn't leave," Emma whispered. "The man with the keys, ... He locked us in." Nathan didn't say a word. He just placed a hand on each of their shoulders and walked them to the car. By the time they got home, he had already connected his laptop to the neighborhood portal. He searched for clubhouse security footage, only to be met with a notice. "Access restricted, admit." That was unusual. Most communities like this had transparent logs. He tried again, bypassing the restriction. Still nothing. The next morning, Nathan attended his first HOA board meeting. It was held in the community center where the smell of lemon disinfectant tried but failed to hide the stale tension in the air. The board sat in a row, smug and relaxed. At the center was Cheryl Buck. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too small, a name badge she didn't need, and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Nathan raised his hand and calmly asked who had locked his children in the clubhouse. Cheryl didn't flinch. "Our doors are on an automatic timer. If your children were in there after hours, they must have missed the closing. Then why were the lights on?" She hesitated just enough to betray herself. "We've had electrical glitches before," she said with a shrug. Nathan said nothing else in the meeting. He thanked them for their time and walked out, though his mind was already running through tactical options. He didn't believe in coincidence, and he knew people who lied under pressure always made mistakes. That night, he checked the clubhouse. In person, quiet, locked, but the keypad looked tampered with scratches that didn't match regular wear. Nathan wasn't a man easily rattled. He had interrogated war criminals, decoded hostile surveillance systems, and slipped into regimes where speaking your mind was a crime. But this was different. This time, someone had made his children feel unsafe. And whoever it was thought they could get away with it because they wore a name badge and sat behind a plastic fold-out table. He placed a small device just above the clubhouse entrance. A motion sensor, battery-powered, invisible at a glance. This wasn't about violations or bylaws anymore. This was personal. In neighborhoods like these, people hide behind the illusion of order. But they never ask the right question. Who's the one moving in next door? The board would learn that soon enough. Nathan wasn't here to fit in. He was here to protect his kids. And if that meant tearing down the entire HOA one board member at a time, so be it. Nathan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room long after the kids had gone to bed, replaying every word Cheryl had said. Automatic timers. Electrical glitches. Explanations that felt rehearsed, not real. At sunrise, he poured himself a cup of black coffee and opened his laptop. It was time to see who these people really were. The Willow Glen HOA website had a portal for residents' newsletters, event schedules, and violation notices. But buried at the bottom was a login link labeled board use only. Nathan smiled. Most neighborhoods didn't expect someone with his background. He opened a console window, typed a few commands, and within minutes was inside. What he found wasn't just HOA business. It was surveillance logs. Every clubhouse entry, camera feed, motion sensor, trigger even notes. One from 2 nights ago read, 2 minors seen loitering inside clubhouse past hours. Frank instructed to secure. Nathan's eyes narrowed. Frank Dobbins. He'd only seen the man once. At the HOA meeting, sitting quietly behind Cheryl, ex-military. From the posture, probably retired law enforcement, and judging from the comment, someone who took rules far too seriously. Secure. That word stuck. Nathan printed the page and pinned it on a corkboard above his desk. He added photos of the board members he'd gathered from their public profiles. Cheryl, Frank, a man named Lloyd Reynolds who handled compliance reports, and a fourth, Caroline Mason, treasurer, silent at the meeting but always watching. He was building a profile. That's how you break a network. You study its weak links. Later that day, Nathan returned to the clubhouse during open hours. He brought Emma and Josh with him, not to scare them, but because he needed to know if anyone would approach them again. They entered the building together. Inside, the clubhouse looked normal. Polished tile, fake plants, a poster advertising the upcoming chili cook-off. The kids sat on the couch while Nathan explored. That's when he heard the voice. Back so soon? Frank Dobbins stood by the vending machine, arms crossed, wearing a community security polo shirt that clearly wasn't official issue. Nathan didn't react, just making sure my kids aren't accidentally locked in again. Frank chuckled. Should have taught them to read the signs. Rules are posted. They read just fine. Frank took a step closer. His smile was too confident. This neighborhood values order. If you don't want trouble, best to follow protocol. Nathan studied his face. The man was trying to intimidate him. That was cute. I appreciate the advice. Nathan replied evenly, but I don't respond well to threats. A silence settled between them before Frank gave a short nod and walked off. Nathan waited 10 more minutes, then left with the kids. At home, he pulled up the footage from the motion sensor he'd installed. He fast-forwarded through the empty hallway until 11:42 p.m. the previous night. There, clear as day, was Frank, keying in a code, peeking inside, then manually locking the door. So much for automatic timers. He downloaded the footage and stored it on an encrypted drive. Then he sent a copy to an old friend, Clint Hayes, now a civil rights attorney in Dallas. No message, just the video. At dinner, Nathan didn't say much. He listened to Josh talk about a science project. Emma mentioned how Mrs. Delaney across the street had brought over banana bread again. Nathan raised an eyebrow. She told me to tell you she used to be on the HOA, Emma added, and that they don't like people who ask questions. He nodded. That night, Nathan visited Mrs. Delaney. Her porch light was dim, but the door creaked open almost instantly. She smiled like someone who had seen more than she let on. Thought you might come by? She said. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Mrs. Delaney invited him in. Her living room was full of antique books, porcelain dolls, and quiet resentment. She poured tea without asking. They've been pulling this stunt for years. Selective enforcement, intimidation, targeting kids. Cheryl calls it correctional policy. Anyone ever report it? Most people move out, or keep their heads down. Nathan didn't nod. He just sipped his tea and stared into the cup like he was calculating. Mrs. Delaney leaned closer. You're not like the others. You're not afraid of them. I'm not here to be afraid, he said. I'm here to end it. The sun rose behind a curtain of gray clouds the next morning, and Nathan could already feel the shift in atmosphere. The air outside was quieter than usual, neighbors pausing midway, eyes lingering just a moment too long. Word had started to spread. Someone was challenging the HOA. Nathan didn't care about whispers. He was building something stronger than gossip-evidence. At 8:12 a.m., his printer spat out the 8th violation notice in less than 10 days. Unapproved, decorative lawn objects, this one said. Emma had put a small painted rock with a smiley face by the mailbox. Josh had drawn it. Now it was non-conforming decoration. He pinned it beside the others. Trash bin, too visible. Front door paint off shade by 1 Pantone level. Grass too long by half an inch. All of them were minor, nonsense infractions. But the frequency said something clear. They were trying to wear him down. After the kids left for school, Nathan returned to his laptop. He accessed the board's private documents again. Now, more comfortably than most of the board members themselves probably could. Inside the archived meeting notes, he found something that made his stomach clench. Last year's internal discussion about safety enforcement measures for unsupervised minors included a bullet point labeled Clubhouse Containment Option Test Run, if applicable. It wasn't just a mistake. They had planned for it, sanctioned it. He cross-checked meeting minutes against a few recorded complaint logs and found something buried under anonymized text, a prior incident involving a teenager locked in the pool restroom overnight. The family had moved out within 2 weeks. No formal complaint filed. No legal action. Nathan leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. This wasn't a power-hungry board. It was a quiet machine, feeding on fear and hoping no one pushed back. By noon, a certified letter arrived. an official HOA summons for a special hearing regarding Nathan's hostile behavior at board meetings, improper surveillance, and violations of community decorum. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so predictable, but Nathan didn't flinch. He had already scheduled a meeting of his own. That evening, 5 neighbors came to his house for coffee. They weren't his friends, not yet, but they were tired. Tired of getting citations for leaving garage doors open for too long. Tired of Cheryl's passive-aggressive newsletters and Frank's silent patrols like some wannabe security guard. Mrs. Delaney sat quietly in the corner with her tea, watching. Nathan showed them the footage. Frank locking the door, the internal HOA emails, the plan to intimidate children. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. One by one, the neighbors nodded, then asked what they could do. Nathan didn't push them. He simply told them what he planned to do. He would attend the hearing. He'd say nothing inflammatory, just ask questions. He'd bring documentation, dates, times, names, logs, and if that didn't stop them, he had the next phase already in motion. He stood from the table and unpinned the newest violation letter from his corkboard. He tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. We let them get away with it, he said, calm but firm, because they count on no one knowing the rules. But I've read every rule, and I've got one of my own. No one asked what that rule was. He didn't need to. Later that night, while the house was quiet, Nathan walked out to the edge of his driveway and stood under the street lamp. The motion sensor on the clubhouse had triggered again at 10:41 p.m. twice. He watched Frank walk out of the building, glance down the street, then disappear into his truck. Nathan knew he was watching now. That was fine. He wanted them to watch because every time they moved, he learned something. And every time they got bolder, they exposed more of what they'd tried so hard to hide. And soon, they'd realize they hadn't just targeted a man with kids, they'd locked horns with someone trained to find cracks in systems and rip them wide open. The day of the HOA hearing arrived with clear skies and an unusual silence across Willow Glen. There were no kids riding scooters, no neighbors trimming hedges. It was as if the entire street was holding its breath. Nathan didn't wear a suit. He came dressed like he always did, clean jeans, a button-down shirt, and that calm presence that made others uneasy when they didn't understand it. The hearing was held in the small meeting hall beside the pool, a space that looked like it had been designed to look official without ever being questioned. Cheryl Buckner sat at the head of the long folding table, her smile tightly pinned in place. Beside her was Frank, arms crossed, glaring like he expected a confrontation. 3 folding chairs had been set up on the opposite side of the room. One for Nathan sat empty. Cheryl cleared her throat. This hearing is a formality. You've been cited for multiple violations, and we've received reports of surveillance on HOA facilities without board consent. Nathan didn't interrupt. He simply opened his leather folder and pulled out a thin stack of papers. I'd like these added to the record, he said, placing the documents in front of her. Cheryl looked down, then paused. The silence was long enough to feel like a shift in pressure. What exactly is this? She asked. Board communication logs, security footage, timestamps, details on the deliberate confinement of minors without parental consent. Frank sat forward in his chair. This isn't a court. No, Nathan said evenly, but it's about to become one. He pulled out a single flash drive and slid it across the table. Footage from 2 separate nights. Both show manual. Override of the clubhouse lock system by your security officer. Frank's face tightened. Cheryl didn't look at him. There's nothing unlawful about securing HOA property, Cheryl said after a beat. Nathan leaned back. Unless you're securing children inside it, after hours, with no adult supervision and no emergency access, then it becomes something else entirely. Cheryl tried to pivot. Even if mistakes were made, your actions hacking into private HOA systems, sharing internal documents, I didn't share them. Yet. Nathan reached into his bag again and pulled out a second folder. This is a complaint drafted for the State Homeowners Protection Board. It outlines procedural abuse, targeting of minors, and evidence of coordinated retaliation against residents. You don't have standing, Cheryl snapped. You're one homeowner. Nathan's voice didn't rise. I'm also a former federal contractor for cyber investigations. I specialize in forensic data analysis and pattern tracing. You might want to double-check who you're threatening. For the first time, Cheryl's polished exterior cracked. It was quick. A flicker, but Nathan saw it. Behind her, Frank shifted in his seat. You don't scare us, Frank muttered. I'm not trying to. Nathan stood. I just want my kids to ride their bikes without getting locked in a building by someone who thinks a neighborhood rulebook gives them that kind of power. He walked out without another word. The next day, violation notices stopped arriving. Nathan didn't celebrate. He waited because silence in a place like Willow Glen wasn't peace. It was preparation. 3 days later, he got the retaliation. His mailbox was smashed in. The decorative rock Josh painted was shattered on the sidewalk. His internet went down briefly, just long enough to notice. Then, at 2 a.m., his phone lit up. An anonymous tip. HOA board had an unlisted group chat used for internal decisions not disclosed to the community. He recognized the number. It was one of the neighbors who had attended the coffee meeting. No name, no direct involvement, just someone who had access and enough conscience to act. Nathan didn't respond. He pulled out a backup laptop, one he used for more delicate projects. This time, he wasn't just gathering logs. He was tracing digital fingerprints. He found the group chat. It was full of sarcasm and arrogance. Frank called Nathan the new mall cop. Cheryl wrote, "Let's push him, he'll crack." Then came something else. A reference to Delaney_files.jpg. Nathan froze. They had something on Mrs. Delaney. He copied everything and shut the laptop. They had underestimated him. But worse, they had gone after someone who had trusted him. Now it wasn't just about his kids. It was about protecting the one neighbor who had stood by him when no one else would, and they were about to find out just how thorough he could be. Nathan spent the next 2 days in quiet preparation. No contact with the board. No escalation, just data. He mapped out timestamps, logged every digital footprint from the HOA chat group, and organized files so cleanly a defense attorney could hand them to a jury without lifting a pen. He had everything. Patterns of retaliation, evidence of surveillance abuse, and most concerning the reference to Delaney_files.jpg. He hadn't confronted Mrs. Delaney yet. He needed to understand what kind of leverage the board thought they had on her. The file was buried in the encrypted archive, obscured beneath layers of misnamed folders. When he finally cracked it open, he stared at the screen for a long time. It was a scanned document, a letter, nearly 12 years old, a confidential incident. Report involving a teenage grandson of Mrs. Delaney arrested once for shoplifting and later acquitted. The file should have been sealed, but there it was. Used as quiet leverage to silence a woman who had dared to vote against Cheryl's proposals. Years earlier, Nathan didn't print the file. He didn't forward it. He simply closed the laptop and sat in the dark. This wasn't just about power anymore. It was blackmail, weaponized fear. The next day, he knocked on Mrs. Delaney's door. She opened it slowly, a cardigan wrapped tightly around her, eyes already knowing. "I figured you'd find it," she said. Nathan stepped inside without a word. "I didn't think they kept it," she added. "It was supposed to be sealed. They've been using it to keep you quiet." Mrs. Delaney nodded, her voice low. "Cheryl said if I ever raised my voice again in a meeting, she'd accidentally send a copy to every resident email. I didn't think they'd actually do it, but I couldn't risk it. Not with my grandson applying to college." Nathan sat across from her and slid a thumb drive onto her coffee table. "Encrypted. If they leak it, I'll know who. And I'll bury them with evidence before they ever finish explaining how they got it." She blinked, then smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was tired. "People like you don't move here," she said. "Most of us just try to survive this place until we can leave." Nathan shook his head. "I didn't move here to survive. I came to raise my kids. That means removing threats." That night, he set the plan in motion. He scheduled a private gathering, invitation only, at the clubhouse. Just 15 people, carefully selected, one representative from each of the households that had complained quietly over the past few weeks. Each had a story. Each had been silenced by threats, shame, or fines. They showed up one by one. Nathan greeted them casually. No speeches, no formal meeting. He simply played a video. Frank manually locking the clubhouse. Cheryl's internal memo about corrective deterrence. The private chat logs with names clearly displayed. No anger, just truth. When the video ended, no one said a word. They just nodded. A few shook their heads in disbelief. Then Nathan dropped the final slide. Scanned notice of recall. Legal, certified, signed by enough residents to force a vote to remove the current board. All it needed was a simple majority. Frank showed up 15 minutes after the meeting ended. He must have gotten wind of it. He stood outside the clubhouse, arms crossed again like he was guarding a crime scene. Nathan walked straight past him without a glance. "You don't know what you're doing," Frank said. Nathan turned slowly. "No," he said. "You don't." The next morning, Cheryl found the recall notice taped to her front door, flanked by a dozen printed emails from the group chat. Frank's truck had its tires slashed. Nathan hadn't done it, but he wasn't surprised. Tension had boiled over. Carolyn, the treasurer, resigned via email that same afternoon. No explanation. Nathan didn't celebrate. He got to work preparing for the vote. Transparency letters, copies of the logs, a formal statement about restoring community trust. He wasn't interested in power. He wanted peace. But first, he needed to finish what the board had started, and in 5 days, Willow Glen would cast its vote. The same people who once whispered from behind closed doors would now decide, in public, whether to keep following fear, or finally choose someone who wouldn't flinch when the pressure came. The 5 days leading up to the vote passed with an uneasy stillness that Nathan knew all too well. It was the kind of quiet before a breach, the moment just before a decision forces people to pick a side. Willow Glen's front lawns stayed mowed, garage doors opened on time. But behind those routine movements, the neighborhood was bracing for something. Nathan walked the streets each morning, not campaigning, just observing. He let the printed packets speak for themselves. He had delivered one to every household, a short, calm explanation of the HOA board's abuse of power, attached with screenshots and security footage. No sensationalism, no finger pointing, just facts. Some residents avoided his gaze. Others nodded quietly when they thought no one was watching. But more than once, someone pulled him aside and said the same thing. It's about time. Still, Cheryl wasn't going down quietly. 3 days before the vote, the HOA posted a newsletter online with a bright red headline, "Community Stability Under Attack." In it, Cheryl accused unnamed residents of tampering with private communications, creating fake documents, and intimidating board volunteers. She didn't name Nathan directly, but everyone knew who she meant. Nathan read it once and closed the tab. That night, he received a formal cease and desist letter mailed, not emailed, that accused him of defamation, digital trespassing, and community disruption. There were no signatures, no legal firm listed, just boilerplate threats and a watermark. From an online template site, he set it aside and continued building the recall documentation. The real blow wouldn't come through a letter. It would come through a vote. Meanwhile, Frank hadn't been seen patrolling in days. His truck remained parked in the same spot down the street, but the bravado was gone. Something had shifted. Nathan had expected retaliation, but he hadn't expected desperation. The morning before the vote, Mrs. Delaney showed up at his front door. She didn't bring tea this time, just a sealed envelope and a face tight with concern. "They're not done," she said. Inside the envelope was a printed screenshot. A new thread from the board chat dated just last night. Someone had leaked it. The conversation was short, but chilling. "If we lose, we dump the files." Nathan read it twice. Cheryl and Frank were discussing a plan to release confidential HOA complaint. History, some legitimate, some fabricated against anyone who signed the recall petition. It wasn't just a smear campaign. It was a threat. Vote against us, and we'll ruin your reputation. Nathan didn't waste time. He drafted a final notice. This time it wasn't a calm summary. It was a warning to every homeowner that the board was preparing to retaliate against voters. He attached copies of the leaked chat and posted the message to every community, bulletin board, and digital portal. He signed his name at the bottom. Then he waited. The night of the vote arrived without fanfare. No balloons, no speeches, just folding chairs in the clubhouse, clipboards, and a rustling tension thick in the air. Cheryl arrived last. She wore a pastel blazer and her usual smile, but her eyes betrayed her. She was scanning the room too much, watching too closely. Nathan sat in the back, silent, focused. One by one, residents stepped forward to cast their vote. Some looked uncertain, others emboldened. Mrs. Delaney was the last to sign. When it was over, the volunteers, 3 residents not affiliated with either side, counted the votes aloud. And the result was clear. The board had been recalled. Unanimously, no. Abstenu, no ties. Just silence. Cheryl stood without speaking. Her smile didn't hold this time. She leapt through the side door, Frank trailing behind her like a defeated bodyguard. Nathan didn't follow. He stayed until the room emptied, then picked up a discarded pen from the sign-in table. It was small, insignificant, but it was over. Or so he thought. The next morning, as he made breakfast for the kids, his phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. "You think this is over? Look under your car." Nathan didn't react right away. He slid the phone face down on the counter and finished flipping the pancakes. Emma was humming quietly as she poured juice. Josh was building a tower out of forks and spoons. Nothing in their world needed to change, not yet. After breakfast, he walked calmly to the driveway. He crouched beside his SUV and ran his fingers beneath the chassis. It didn't take long. A small, flat black box with a blinking LED tracking device. Basic, but effective. He stood slowly, scanning the street. A jogger passed. A delivery truck parked across the cul-de-sac. Ordinary movements, but now Nathan saw them differently. He walked back inside, placed the tracker in a lead-lined pouch, and set it in the garage next to an unused lawnmower. Then he picked up his phone and sent one text. Time to escalate. Less than an hour later, Clint Hayes returned the call. His voice came through the speaker sharp and focused. Nathan's longtime friend, now an attorney in Dallas, had been following everything. You've got what you need. Nathan exhaled slowly, enough to bury them, but they're still watching, still poking. They won't stop until you make it public. Nathan nodded to himself. Then it's time. That afternoon, Nathan drafted a detailed complaint state. Housing board, local news outlets, online forums where HOA abuse stories spread like wildfire. He included documents, screenshots, timelines, and the latest threat text. The tracking device, photographed and logged. He didn't publish it yet, but he sent copies to trusted contacts and scheduled its release. All of it set to go live in 24 hours if anything happened to him, his kids, or anyone who supported the recall. By the time sunset painted the streets orange, Nathan had done what he always did best, established control of the chaos. But the chaos wasn't done. That evening, Mrs. Delaney's porch light didn't turn on. It always turned on. Nathan walked over. He knocked. No answer. The next moment, the door cracked open just enough for him to see her eye. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. They know you're close. Did someone threaten you? She nodded. Barely. They came to my door this morning. Said if I keep siding with you, I'll regret it. I don't want to disappear. Nathan, you won't, he said firmly. That's a promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. The next morning, every mailbox in Willow Glen had a manila envelope inside. No names, just a copy of a fake violation letter from years ago accusing Mrs. Delaney of neighbor harassment, her signature forged at the bottom. It looked official, but Nathan immediately recognized the digital timestamp embedded in the file. The forgery was done last night. It was sloppy, rushed, desperate. Nathan had seen this kind of behavior in the field before. When the walls closed in, people like Cheryl lashed out. Frank had been silent since the vote. But Nathan knew it was only a matter of time before he made one last move. That night, Nathan set the bait. He parked his SUV across the street from his house, left the garage door halfway open, a light on upstairs. Then he waited in the dark. At 2:13 a.m., a figure crept through the bushes near the side of the house. Not a kid, not random. It was Frank. Nathan recorded every second from the infrared camera set near the hedge. Frank moved to the SUV, then circled to the garage, shining a light into the corners. But before he could enter, a voice stopped him. Step away. Frank turned. Nathan stood on the porch, phone in hand, camera pointed directly at him. Frank froze. You've already lost, Nathan said calmly. This just makes it easier to prove intent. Frank's voice was tight. You think the vote means anything? Cheryl's not done. I am. Frank took a step back, but headlights turned onto the street. A patrol car. Nathan hadn't called them yet. He just knew how people like Frank thought and had timed the alert with a motion sensor. As the officers stepped out, Frank didn't resist. He just looked at Nathan with something bitter behind his eyes. This isn't over. Nathan watched him get cuffed. No, he said. It's just getting started. The official report labeled it as trespassing, and attempted tampering with private property. Frank didn't spend long in custody just overnight, but that was enough. Word spread before sunrise. By morning, every porch in Willow Glen had a neighbor, whispering about the man who once strutted down their sidewalks in his fake uniform and mirrored sunglasses. Cheryl never showed her face again. 3 days after Frank's arrest, the neighborhood board held an emergency session, not to reinstate anyone, not to fight, but to admit what everyone already knew. The old guard was done. Nathan didn't attend the meeting. He was at home with his kids, fixing Emma's bike and helping Josh assemble a half-finished Lego spaceship. He didn't need to watch them crumble. The truth had already done that. By the end of the week, Nathan was appointed interim HOA president. Not because he asked, not because he wanted it, but because, after everything, he was the only one the neighborhood trusted. At the next full community meeting, Nathan stood at the front of the clubhouse, facing the same rows of chairs where Cheryl once smiled down like royalty. This time, the room felt different. Quiet, expectant, not afraid. He began simply, I didn't move here to change anything. I came for peace, for my kids. And what I found was a system that punished anyone who asked a question. He held up the original violation letter, though, one accusing his kids of unauthorized presence. My children were locked in this building, he said. Not because they did anything wrong, but because someone decided they didn't belong. He placed the letter down and continued. We're changing the rules. Starting with how we treat each other, he outlined the reforms. No enforcement actions without full transparency, no anonymous complaints, no disciplinary action without evidence reviewed by a neutral panel, and above all no targeting of children, ever again. The vote passed unanimously. No resistance, no debate. Afterward, residents lingered in the clubhouse. They talked openly. They introduced themselves to neighbors they'd never dared speak to. And for the first time since Nathan had arrived, Willow Glen felt like a neighborhood again. As the last of the chairs were folded and the lights dimmed, Mrs. Delaney approached. They're gone for good. She asked. Nathan gave a small nod. They're gone, but I'll keep watching. She handed him a small envelope. You might want to read this. It came to my door yesterday. No return address. Inside was a printed email. Dated years ago, a conversation between Cheryl and a developer. The subject line, controlling residents through enforcement leverage. Nathan read it twice. They'd been planning something far bigger, a buyout deal? The HOA wasn't just about power. It was about positioning, controlling who stayed, who left, and who got bought out under pressure. Mrs. Delaney's voice cut through his thoughts. I don't think they were just trying to push families out. I think they were setting up something bigger. Nathan folded the paper carefully. Then we find out who else was in on it. That night, Nathan updated his files one final time. He logged every violation, every forged letter, every digital fingerprint that had led to the fall of the board. But he also started a new document. Title: Long-Term Development Interests. Unexplained HOA land transfers, because something told him this wasn't over. It had never just been about his kids. That had only been the trigger. The system was much larger, and someone else, somewhere, had likely been pulling strings from behind the scenes. Cheryl and Frank weren't the architects. They were tools. As the neighborhood slept, Nathan stepped outside and looked up at the clubhouse. It was quiet now, lights off, peaceful. He walked over and, using a screwdriver, fastened a small brass plate to the side of the building, something he had engraved earlier that day. It read, "Protected by those who refuse to be silenced." He stepped back, hands in his pockets, and allowed himself a breath of stillness. But he wasn't done. Not yet, because the clubhouse was secure now. But the real enemy, the one who orchestrated the policy, who funded the enforcement, who stood to profit from everything, they hadn't shown their face. And Nathan wasn't the kind of man who walked away before seeing the whole operation burn.